Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Month of January has been quite a month in this war, and now that we're slowly edging to the end of it, we can say that it was very difficult because Russians have been able to find some tactics despite being very costly for them, but they're still producing some of the results. They're able to capture some of the smaller towns and areas. But on the other hand, we see huge, massive developments that the Western powers are experiencing in their relation of understanding what this war is, what it represents, what Russia is, and how we should go forward with this. What we're seeing is that some of the last barriers that the Western powers had in respect to Russia and what weapons should be provided to Ukraine are now crumbling away. And we're seeing that January, the Ramstein meeting that was held in Germany, it was the eighth one on count. It was a massive new development, and what I did, I've looked into what kind of weapon system have been pledged to be delivered to Ukraine, and the list is kind of massive. We already had some previews on the community tabs, and I'm pretty sure you've heard as well. So we're going to talk about what's going to get delivered, at least what is available to be viewed online. And we're going to talk about what capabilities Ukraine is having and what it is planning to do with the equipment that it's getting. So please use the time codes that I will be adding to the video to navigate the sections, because I'm not completely sure, but maybe the video will be quite long. First thing that is important to say is that we as a public, we don't have the full access to all of the information about what's going to get delivered to Ukraine. And the best example of that is, for example, Finland, that they said that they will deliver weapons, ammunition, and vehicles in total package for 434 million euros, but they didn't specify what's exactly going to be in the package or so on. We know that in Ramstein meeting, there's a huge coalition of over 50 states. So there's a lot of things that are happening outside of camera presence or popular presence. Another example is the story that we find out about Bulgaria being one of the major initial supporters during the first stages of the war. Basically, that Bulgaria was the country that pretty much saved Ukraine when it really matters at the start of the war. And those things are very important to keep in mind, that while there might not be always things said on the camera, and this obviously first and foremost is said about Germany, that we do not know the full extent of what is being delivered, what is not being delivered. We understand it? Good. Then let's go to the first section. So during January, things happened quite extensively. We had heard pledges from different countries about the ammunition, about the vehicles that they're delivering. And I think one of the most crucial things to know about is that besides of the Ramstein meeting that we're having with over 50 countries participating, is that we're also having some internal groups are finally coming about. We already knew that there's United Kingdom that is extremely dedicated to helping Ukraine win this war. They have been pretty much the front runner on all major positions during this supplement of weapons in this war. They were basically pushing for more and more advanced weaponry to be submitted. We also know that the Baltic states, Poland, and Finland have been very strong supporters of Ukraine as well. And now we finally have an official group that would be essentially the most dedicated countries to the victory of Ukraine over Russia. If we're talking about, the topic has been discussed quite a lot about the fact that there is some hesitation in the West, that some countries just want to control how this war flows. Some speculation said that there is countries in this group that just wants to essentially Ukraine and Russia to tire up each other and then just negotiate whatever conditions they are at. All of these are not nice, but they are what they are. And at least some of these countries are helping Ukraine. However, now we have 9 countries that signed essentially the common so-called Tallinn Pledge. I prefer to call it "Let's fuck up Putin Pledge" because that's exactly what it is. The 9 countries are Denmark, Czechia, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, United Kingdom, Slovakia, and Netherlands. And these 9 countries have pretty much stated that we will do whatever it takes. We would agree to sacrifice our own defensive capabilities, our own military capabilities in favor of arming Ukraine in order to achieve a very specific goal: win over Russia. So now we are seeing that based on these 9 countries, there are other countries that are expressing their interest into this. So we can roughly say that there are groups in this Ramstein group that are overall against Russia. And then there is the Tallinn Pledge group, or Let's Fuck Up Putin Pledge group, which are saying we will live and breathe and try to do whatever we can in order to defeat Putin. The greatest example of this is probably Denmark. Well, obviously, it's like my closest country because this is the country where I live in. Denmark has essentially bought 19 Caesar artillery systems, and they are delivering these 19 systems to Ukraine. So the caveat is that it's the only artillery systems that Denmark has. So Denmark essentially saying, we will not have any artillery systems, we will send everything to Ukraine. That's just some understanding about the speculation and about the different countries that are doing. And we know that it's also including training, it's also including spare parts for Ukraine and so on, some other things. Additionally, in a discussion that's going to follow, I'm not going to be discussing about the ammunition too much, like what kind of ammunition, 155 millimeter ammunition. There's plenty of those, like hundreds and thousands of different artillery ammunition, shells, anti-tank missiles, and so on that are supplied to Ukraine, but I'm not going to be mentioning a lot of those. So if I'm skipping that, please forgive me. And obviously, if I miss something, then again, this is just something to be aware of. The first position that we should talk about is anti-air. Anti-air in Ukraine was mostly focused in the earlier stages to providing MANPADS and like short-range anti-air systems. And since then, Ukraine has been asking for more and more advanced weaponry, and slowly but surely some of the systems made it to Ukraine. Well, this month we have quite a lot of development. Firstly, let's cover the older stuff and short-range stuff. So there are obviously Latvia that is providing MANPADS additional for Stinger missiles to be shot at, and they're actually shown themselves to be quite good and capable. That the people, if they see missiles flying and cruise missiles flying in time, they're able to shut them down. And it's pretty nice, especially what US is providing. They're providing 8 Avenger systems. And those Avenger systems are essentially Humvees with 4 tubes of missiles on top of them. So they can be quite mobile and shoot down those targets depending on where they're spotted and what's their trajectory. Besides that, Lithuania is supplying Ukraine with L70 anti-air systems, and Poland is supplying with S-60 anti-air systems. And those are basically anti-air guns, older times, I think 1950s, while by themselves they're not really capable for any kind of modern anti-air, but it definitely can help Ukraine to fight drones or slower flying air targets. So everything helps. If we now go into more modern direction, then first thing that we should say is what US provides. It's the Sea Sparrow missiles, an undisclosed amount. And those Sea Sparrow missiles, they're usually based on the basically ships. And they are dedicated to shoot down air targets and anti-ship missiles, such as, for example, the missile that hit Dnipro. That was an anti-ship missile, and Sea Sparrows are exactly designed to hit those. Besides that, there is also in Italy providing Ukraine with SAMP Battery, and Canada providing NASAMS battery systems. Both of them are really good and advanced anti-air systems, and it's excellent news. But obviously, the hottest thing to say in this category is that Germany is providing a Patriot battery, and Netherlands stepping up, providing two at the same time. Or maybe not at the same time, but they're pledging two Patriot missile systems. That is massive. To put in perspective, one Patriot missile system can cover the most crucial areas of one big city, such as Kyiv. If we take now that Ukraine has 4 or even 5 of those, it will cover pretty much major bigger cities, and or they can be deployed closer to the front line to then protect the Ukrainian troops from jets or helicopters, to deny air control from the Russians. Really good news, especially because Patriot is essentially anti-ballistic missile systems, so they will be able to intercept a lot of those ballistic missiles, and this makes me really, really, really happy. Next category to cover is that Latvia and Lithuania are in total providing 4 helicopters to Ukraine. One is Mi-8 and the other one is Mi-17, and the two are Mi-8 and 2 are Mi-17s. And Latvia is also providing unmanned aerial vehicles to Ukraine. This doesn't increase Ukrainian air capacity yet, so hopefully next Ramstein meeting, as stated by Alexei Reznikov, is going to be more dedicated towards strengthening Ukrainian air assets. But so far, not much capability increase at all. So the place where Ukraine is getting first significant improvement is the artillery. And we start with UK pledging to provide 600 Brimstone missiles. And they have shown themselves to be very capable in Ukraine, especially because Ukraine adapted them to be deployed on mobile platforms that can just quickly move throughout the battlefields and shoot. They are amazing, and 600 more of them will allow to essentially target quite a lot of assets that Russians are having. Makes me very happy. Next, talking about howitzers, we know that US is providing 105mm howitzers, a whole 36 of them. And then it's Estonia that is actually providing an undisclosed amount, but they're mentioning it's going to be tens. It's the D30 howitzer and FH70 howitzers. They're both are somewhat old, but again, for Ukrainians, any artillery that fires is great. And the most important part of the artillery that has shown themselves to be the vital role on the battlefield is the self-propelled artillery systems on the battlefield. There are teasers that shown themselves to be one of the best for the Ukrainian current warfare that they're waging. All the Ukrainians that I know of that work with Caesars, they are praising it for how good they are. Then we have United Kingdom pledging 24 AS90 systems, and they're going to deliver 8 now, and they're going to do another 8 batches of 8 and 8 later on, so 24 in total. And we have Poland saying that they will continue providing KRAB systems, which is South Korean designed artillery systems that is adapted for Polish needs and standards. And there is undisclosed amount, but they're just continuously supplying Ukraine with those. And then we have the freshest of the bunch, which is US providing M109 Paladins, a whole 18 of them. And most importantly is the Swedish Archer systems. It's basically a robot on wheels in the sphere of self-propelled artillery. It's self-loading, not self-driving, but self-loading, self-firing, and so on. It's amazing. It's, I mean, everyone is saying that this is the top of the top. There is no system in the world that is better than the Archer systems. And there's going to be a whole 12 of them that is pledged by Sweden to be delivered to Ukraine. Now, getting closer to the core of this whole January package for Ukraine, we're going into the transport vehicles, and that includes just vehicle for transporting cargo. Ukraine needs a lot of those. Ukrainians are always asking, we need pickup trucks, we need vehicles, we need to get things from the back lines to the front lines and back. So it's both for medical purposes, transportation, everything. And this also includes getting infantry forward into the battle to get them to the battle line. And with that, we have quite a lot of those. Firstly, we know that France is supplying Ukraine with undisclosed amount of Bastion APCs, which is really, really nice, but that's the only position we don't know how many of those will be coming. Then we're talking about the additional APCs. We know that Canada is going to supply 200 Senator APCs, which is amazing. Those are really, really good and will be a big help to Ukraine. Then we have Portugal and US supplying 14 from Portugal and 100 from US and 113 APCs. They're kind of old, but they've shown themselves to be essentially what they're supposed to do, a battlefield taxi. It's a little bit light armored vehicle that protects from shrapnel damage and other things that might hit troops in movement. Those are actually extremely crucial because this still is artillery warfare, and majority of wounds that Ukrainian soldiers are getting are from artillery, shrapnel pieces, and so on. So don't underestimate the necessity of APCs for Ukraine. Then continue with APCs, we have UK saying that they will provide various types of APCs, including some Bulldog APCs. They've been tested before, but I just mentioned them. There's going to be, they said hundreds, but some other sources are saying that it's going to be 100 precisely. So it's a little bit unclear how many exactly, but definitely we're talking hundreds. And then US, for the first time, will deliver Striker APCs. And those will come in different combinations. About like 20 of them will be so-called engineering parts. They will have essentially a roller before them to clear out any kind of mines or whatever can be there. I've heard mixed reporting on how good the Striker is, but I think it's a little bit unfair to compare and say that Striker is not good enough. Because when we're talking about the Striker as a good vehicle for US Army that is not used to living in holes that are filled with mud, at least not for the majority of time. So at that moment, Striker compared to BTR or BMP-1 even just becomes a wondrous thing ever, just because of what it is and what it does. It is still miles ahead of whatever Ukraine has been using before. So Striker is coming. And then if we're going into the more lighter vehicles, there's obviously MRAPs that have shown themselves to be wonderful. US is sending 108 MRAP systems. They don't disclose the name of them, but they're coming, which is good. And MRAPs have multiple times showed themselves to be very, very nice, both when hitting mines or when getting into a gunfight, suddenly like an ambush or something. Super useful. They've been saving lives all over Ukraine. And there is going to be also from US about 40 different trucks to tow vehicles. And there's going to be a total pledge of 488 Humvees. Those are very important for Ukraine. And obviously Ukraine needs thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of those. So overall, we see significant motorization of Ukrainian army being in place. Essentially, we're having countries delivering hundreds of motorized vehicles, which makes the whole Ukrainian army more mobile. And that is crucial for Ukraine. We very often underestimate the distances and how huge Ukraine is. For that, like I recommend you watching a video between Jake Bro and Paul Massaro where they talk, and when Paul actually visited Ukraine, you can just tell him when describes like just how huge Ukraine is. And it's definitely feels that way. It's the biggest country in Europe, and distances between the different battle positions, even around Bakhmut itself, getting from the north to the south side and back, can be extremely far away. So we should not underestimate just even light, but any kind of motorization that Ukraine should get. Now we're getting in a combat power that Ukraine is actually getting on the ground. And those will be either armored fighting vehicles. I mean, there's only one of those. It's France that are delivering the AMX-10 that has been discussed quite a while. It's some people call it a wheeled tank and so on. Obviously, it's not a tank. It doesn't execute what tank's supposed to execute, essentially be this forward piercing fortress that would allow to penetrate deep fortifications. But it's a very good tool for Ukraine. We need not to underestimate what kind of warfare Ukraine is fighting. We need to see that Ukraine is not really fighting right now any kind of tank battles. Like, it's not a tank on tank activities. Mostly we're seeing it's either people or some kind of light support vehicles, and then there's like mobile groups that are just hiding in some kind of buildings or whatnot. For that purpose, a fast moving vehicle with a big turret is excellent. In those kind of situations, just quickly go to the very useful, not very useful, but very favorable position, take the favorable position, get a couple of pot shots in, kill the Russians, suppress the position, get out. Amazing. And if there is some kind of Russian BMP-1 or BMP-2 supporting the troops, boom, boom, no more BMP-1 or BMP-2. Amazing stuff. So we should not underestimate, we should not focus on the fact that's like, if it's not a tank, then it's useless. That is a very fallacious idea of thinking about it. And in the same sense, we should not think about the infantry fighting vehicles. So those are Germany that is saying they're going to supply 40 Marders. They did it when the US pledged about 50 Bradleys. But after that, US also in the recent package said that it will additionally deliver 59 Bradleys. So right now, the total Bradleys delivered to Ukraine is being pledged of 109. There is also Poland that says they're going to deliver about 42 different kind of infantry fighting vehicles. Most probably it's going to be either BMP-1 or BMP-2 from the Soviet military. I don't expect it to be modern. But obviously the most unexpected and probably, I don't know, like even the best, is that Sweden is going to be providing 50 CV-90s infantry fighting vehicles. And those are regarded in a very high standards. They have a 40 millimeter automatic cannon, which essentially shreds everything. It can shred pretty much all of the Russian light armor, and it can also shred, some people are saying that some kind of older tanks like T-62s that Russians are pulling out from their storages, it can also pretty much level in quite a fast manner. So it's a very powerful beast on the battlefield, especially because it's just an IFV. That is really good. And I think the important kind of note to say is, like, why is this such a big deal? Like, didn't Ukraine have BMPs that they captured from Russians and so on? Yes, but I think the most relevant part to understand is, in a warfare that Ukraine is fighting, information, gathering of information, and then transferring of that information both to troops and to the vehicle, driver, shooter, and so on, is super relevant. Modern infantry fighting vehicles of NATO standards are able to essentially pick up whatever Russians are doing. Like BMP-1 just doesn't have an infrared or like a night vision sights. It just doesn't have all the modern equipments. And even if we're talking tanks, a lot of Russian tanks that are coming in are not modern enough, so they might not even spot the Bradley fighting vehicles that is just arriving to position. It is completely possible that just because the information is being shared and gathered throughout the battlefield, and with modern equipment, this information is being shared in between drivers and stations and the command, then we can say that even, for example, Bradley coming up against the Russian tanks, supposedly tanks should be superior, but Bradley will be the one that is going to be taking the kill in that. And a lot of people would rather bet if they where they would want to be, either in T-62 tank, or they would like to be on the opposite side inside of a Bradley fighting vehicles. I think the answer is quite clear for a lot of people. And the last category that has been discussed in and out in the past couple of days is the tanks. We obviously don't have Leopard 2 as a part of the package, but there is obviously a caveat to this. And I'm going to talk about it in just a second. I'm just going to underscore that it's going to be United Kingdom that's going to provide 14 Challenger 2 tanks, which is a massive force on their specialized local area. And there's also Czechia, there is also Morocco that are providing T-72 tanks. Czechia is providing undisclosed amount of the modernized tanks, and Morocco has allegedly already provided or is providing 20 T-72 tanks. And Poland came with an announcement that they're ready to provide and train a tank brigade on the T-72 tanks that they're having in their position. So it's about from 100 to 200 tanks. It depends what they define as a tank brigade. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's like what, 150 tanks we can easily talk about was pledged in this discussion. And I want to really underscore this. So first thing for us all to be aware of. The tanks have been coming to Ukraine, both from Russia, Poland, Czechia, US modernized, the Soviet tanks, and so on. And they are coming. They are continuing coming. Poland is pledging tanks from their own supplies. So we should not say that there is no tanks going to Ukraine. That is untrue. When Zaluzhny asked for tanks to be sent, he needed 300 tanks to make an offensive. He didn't state what kind of tanks he needed. Now, we obviously want Ukraine to receive Western-style battle tanks, and more specifically, Leopard 2s, because Leopard 2s have been used throughout Europe, whereas, for example, Abrams have not. So Abrams doesn't really have a full developed supply chain throughout Europe. So the whole discussion with Germany, I am quite positive that it's going to get resolved. Poland will be training Ukrainian crews in the use of Leopard 2 tanks. So when this resolution finally will come, and it will come, I am 100% certain Ukraine will get everything. So when the resolution with the Leopard 2 comes, at that moment, Ukrainian crews will already be trained. And I'm quite certain that it's going to come quite soon. But the trajectory and the takeaway from this thing that we need to take is that tanks are being provided. It is still not Western style tanks, and it's still not a big thanks to Germany, because Germany is continuously blocking. And I've heard all of the excuses that people are making for Germany, that there was no official request to supply tanks and so on, which is all complete BS. We know that if there would be a desire, a way forward would already be found, right? And the fact that they have been moving a goalpost saying that Germany just doesn't want to be first to supply tanks, and even after UK supplying Challenger 2, Germany doesn't budge. It's all excuses. All of them are. So whatever kind of game that they're playing, like, I don't know why it is the tanks that Scholz's government decided to be the hill to die on, but the pressure on Germany is immense, and we should not let go of that pressure until it bulges, because tanks save lives. Whatever Germany is providing is going to save lives of Ukrainians. And we need to get that message very, very clearly. We need to understand that we're not getting the weapons to Ukraine to just, kill people or invade some other country. It's a defensive action. It's for saving lives. To sum it up, the situation is developing really fast. We see that this month has been absolutely crazy. The main important capabilities that Ukraine is being provided, we see, are the ground-based offensive capabilities. Ukraine is definitely being prepped to A, defend against a possible Russian attack. So they're getting all of the instruments that they need, both to get to the specific places on the battlefield, the troops, also to have support for those troops with APCs, and also provide tanks to help defend positions that needs defending. Or later on, once the quantities of these equipment is going to be increasing, because with the quantity that pledged in January, In most areas, it covered about a third, almost a third from what General Zaluzhny has asked for. Again, we don't know everything that was said under behind the closed doors, but we definitely can approximately aim that it was about a third for what General Zaluzhny has been asking for. All in all, that means that Ukraine is being prepped both for a defensive and offensive campaign this spring. It's really good news. It's a major capability increase. And as a cherry on top, we have now discussions that are happening between Netherlands and United States about the fact that maybe F-16 should be provided to Ukraine. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to be provided tomorrow or maybe next month or a month after. Probably it's going to be a long-term perspective. But the point is, we see the psychological barriers crumble. There are still countries that are clinging to some kind of misunderstood statements about defensive, offensive weaponry distinctions and trying to make excuses for why they still want more Ukrainians dead. But with that said, we shouldn't also bash Germany too much, because while they're not allowing and supplying tanks, the last piece of the puzzle that Ukraine need to essentially continue winning, like to really turn around the ground war, they are still supplying quite a lot. Just recently they pledged, I think it was 1.1 billion euro pledge of all of the things supplied to Ukraine. So we should not underestimate what kind of help Germany is doing. With that said, continuing pressuring for tanks. This is a crucial thing that needs to be delivered. Ukraine needs to win this. Russia needs to be crushed and put in the place where the aggressive, bloody dictators deserve. And we as a Europe and United States, the Western world, need to make sure that this happens like this and we have our peaceful and law-abiding way of life preserved. I love you all, guys. Thank you so much for staying with me with this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Slava Ukraini!